Hey everybody, Lucat here. Today I wanted to talk about how I shade my drawings, or at least how I conceptualize the idea of shading. So I wanted to say first three important concepts that I use every day whenever I'm shading drawings, making paintings, or doing any sort of 2D artwork. Those concepts go in this order, and it's kind of a hierarchy. It's first form, then light, and finally shape. So there's a lot more depth and nuance to this conversation, but I'm going to just try to simplify and explain my process and the way I think about things. So let's get into talking about it. Okay, so the first concept that I wanted to talk about is form. So while I'm talking, I'll just be drawing. Uh, Form is probably the most important on the hierarchy, or at least it sits at the bottom of the pyramid or top of the hierarchy, however you want to think about it. But form exists outside of a 2D space, and that's why I usually am always thinking about form, even when I'm not thinking about light or shape. That being in the case that I'm sculpting or creating some other type of visual art that still might be represented in 2D, but there's less concepts of lighting and shape that I really have to deal with, and I'm more just thinking about the actual structure and form. You don't have to be able to see, you can feel, you can conceptualize form as 3D objects, and you can simplify it into 3D objects. So when I'm shading, I'm usually thinking the thing that I'm trying to translate on 2D canvas is a 3D form. Uh, that is number one. Okay, so next on that hierarchy is lighting. The reason why I put it next on the hierarchy is because after form and the feeling or the sense of touch, you have your sense of sight, and that is the connection between the 2D space and the 3D space. That is where you're able to see a 2D illusion and perceive it as a 3D object. And lighting does this in the way that we can't really see pictures without light. And you also can use lighting within the picture to inform what the form is. So that is the second thing that I'm usually thinking about after I have the form or a bit of understanding about the form, or I'm thinking about it. I'm understanding what is my lighting scenario. There are many different types of ways you can light objects or your scene, and there's many types of light that are real, and we have like distinguishing qualities of light that have different effects on a space. Um, that is more of a specific topic about lighting and less about how I shade. So maybe in another video, I'll be able to go more in depth into my ideas about lighting. But as of now, for the concept of shading, lighting is a tool that we use to organize the picture. So when you're shading, as you can see in the time lapse, there are lighter parts and darker parts, and a lot of times those are separated in between light and shadow. However, it's not always the case, and even in most of my artwork, it's sort of a mixture of form and lighting concepts. And then we'll get to the final concept today, which is shape. So we can talk about that. Okay, now shape is probably one of the most fun and directly visible ways that you can shade on in a 2D space. Because you're restricted to 2D, shape is the way that illusion is given back to us. So even though we can have all this input of these ideas of form and lighting put into our drawing, we are restricted in translating back 2D images, which are 2D shapes. A lot of what changed the way I shade was just the initial concept of a light and dark separation, or light and shadow separation. And then on top of that, light and dark shapes in general being the dominating way that I sort of organize my pictures. And the way that I shade is just by thinking, okay, I want this to be lighter, this to be darker. I can either use form to just show like contours of the form. I can either use lighting to show that there's a light shapes and dark shapes, or I can just embellish shapes in general, just say like, okay, I want this shape to be here because it's taking all those concepts and sort of molding them together. So shape is where it all sort of comes together and translates into a picture. Um, so, what do we get from all three of these together, and how does this directly translate into a process for shading? Well, I'll explain a quick process, and then hopefully you'll be on your way to maybe trying some of these concepts yourself. Okay, so what is my initial processes? So usually what I try to do is first establish my conception of the form. Imagine that the thing that I'm drawing really exists in a 3D space. How would that look from different angles? How is that going to turn in space? And what does it feel like? Then I think about what lighting scenario is happening in my picture. Am I having a direct light source? Am I having a more ambient light source or a environmental light source? And then I sort of think about those two things in tandem, and that is what informs the shapes that I put down. And so it is sort of a cycle of that process where I put down form, I engage with it with my lighting and my ideas of whatever the lighting scenario is, and then I translate that into shapes that like tell the viewer what I think is happening. So it's kind of a process that requires just a bit of iteration and time and being able to be flexible because your canvas might not always agree with you. Your ideas might not be what you thought they were. And until you put it on the paper, you might not be able to see your full vision. So I would encourage you guys to just try out maybe using some of these concepts. I know they're very brief and basic, but I just wanted to, make a video kind of talking about these things since I'm making videos that are mostly concerning drawing. And yeah, I hope you got something out of this video, and feel free to ask any questions you have in the comments. And also, feel free to come in and check out my lives that I do almost daily. It's at varying times during the day, but usually Eastern time, sometime in the afternoon or evening, I'll be streaming. And yeah, I draw live so you can see some live processes, or you could just check out my lives in uh, uh, in my back catalog in the lives tab of my channel. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this process and listening to me speak. I hope to see you guys in a future video. Yeah, bye. Have a good one. So the first thing on our list is form. God. Okay, get your feet off of here. It's not.